And so there was in the front office, I believe, put together a tax package.
That's correct.
That was based both on covering the gap in the existing fiscal year,
Right.
And anticipating the spending that would be coming up in the following fiscal year, plus the Abbott versus Burke Supreme Court decision regarding funding of public education. This all ended up being pulled together in one giant sum.
That's correct.
How involved was the Office of Management and Budget in pulling together this strategy or this program?
I would say not too much involved in the strategy as to what we're going to do first or not, but very much involved in the details of how it would be executed and developed.
So
for example, I was not in the room when somebody decided we were going to raise the sales tax and the income tax, and we were going to do that. We may have had our views about it, and I might have transferred them on to Doug as to what I, as a professional, thought about doing it this way as opposed to that way. But in the inter-sanctum discussions of what was going to go on. But once that decision, for example, I remember being very much involved in developing the formulas for the school aid distribution. Personally, because earlier in my career, I had a lot of interest in school aid formulas and T&E law. So we would run meetings after meetings on how to develop the formula to address what we thought would be the Supreme Court's ruling on the T&E law. So
full disclosure, I was working on the second floor of the State House at that time on separate issues, but I can distinctly remember Tom Corcoran, who was the policy and planning person on education, and Henry Coleman, who shared an office with Tom and was the sort of the economics guru, pouring over spreadsheets that were a mile long about what any given change to the T&E formula would mean to every school district in the state. And I'm sure those were the kinds of spreadsheets that you were pouring over with Tom every time the formula was
What I
slightly
remember
changed.
is we would have these meetings. The principals I remember were Tom, and of course Nate Skrovanik was involved a lot because Nate's career in the legislature had a lot to do with the school aid formula. So Nate was very familiar, and Tom and Nate and I and Brenda Bacon at times and other folks.
Carl Van Horn must also have been involved as well, I would think.
Carl was not, but it's a little foggy there. And of course, in evolving with any formula, or for any tax plan, for example, you'd always want to get printouts of who are the winners and losers in this formula. What municipalities or what school districts are going to get money if you tweak the formula this way as opposed to that way. Same thing in tax reforms. If you're going to increase taxes or change the tax rate, who's going to be impacted by it? So you want to know those kind of decisions, know those facts before final decisions are made. So I guess I was involved a lot, but I would say not in the macro decisions, which I would say would be a mistake. You know, in any other state, the budget director would be right there. But my advice and counsel would be through the treasurer, and then whatever decisions they talked about in the inner sanctum would be their point.
Now, would you be prepared to say 24, 25 years after the fact what your private advice to Doug Bourbon was?
Well, I would say this. I would say we absolutely, positively need a tax increase. For the budget that the governor was going to deliver, it would usually be in February. I think he got an extension to March. Most new governors do.
For the 1991 fiscal
1991.
year.
We're still finishing out 1990, right? The budget that
he inherited.
That Governor Kean submitted. Governor Florio had to execute it at the final end. And we need $2 billion. And think of it this way. And also, the budget that was ultimately approved was only an increase of about 0.5% or 1%, as I remember. So you might say, geez, if you want $2 billion, ultimately we raised about $1.4 billion was the sales tax. Why do you need all that money if the increase in the budget was only 1%? Well, if you remember, I said we had to do $600 million of actions in order to close out the budget. Plus, built into the budget that was submitted were these several one-time actions, like the windfall profits tax that was built into it, changing in some payment dates. So we had to cover that. In addition, there were some increases we absolutely had to make. New pension payments, increases for salaries, Medicaid. I digress for a second. During that time frame, particularly in the Kean and the Florio administration, Medicaid was on an upward path. Mm-hmm. Governor Kean used to refer to it as the Pac-Man of the budget. I mean, it was gobbling.
I thought he talked about corrections as the
No,
Pac-Man
he
of the budget.
talked about Medicaid as being the Pac-Man. And corrections, of course, during that time was in the growth industry.
Oh, yes.
You're familiar, I think.
Yeah.
But Medicaid was the big driver. I mean, they were big numbers, $200 and $300 million each year on a budget that was only 12 or 13 billion. Increases. Mm-hmm. So we had to build that into next year's budget. So we raised, ultimately, in the sales tax, about $1.4 billion, at least that was the proposal. Increase the sales tax from 6% to 7%, extend the sales tax to certain other items that weren't taxed.
Toilet paper being the
Toilet
most
paper being
visible.
one of the big to-do about, roll that back because that's affecting everybody's life every day. How could you do that, Governor? But when people think about it, they say, well, gee, how did you spend that $1 billion for? You must have spent it for new stuff. We didn't. It was only a small budgetary increase, basically to handle growth in Medicaid and to handle growth in pension costs, mandatory. There was lots of reductions. I believe we reduced the homestead rebate program. So we were really filling in the problem that the economy had driven the state to do and actions that were done to complete the 1990 budget.
There were also some significant layoffs during that period.
Not too many. The big layoffs hit a little bit later. We can talk about that in the
I guess that would be in the next
1993,
one.
the third year of the Florio administration, but we did do some cutbacks. And then we had the issue, I guess I can't tell you because I can't remember, other than I know we needed an increase. What you're going to do about the school financing issue, because of course, as you know, the final decision was, let's raise the income tax. Governor Kean had raised it his first year from 2.5 to 3.5 because of the problems that confronted him the first year. And Florio raised it up to, I think it was 7.5%, if I remember properly, to fund the T&E law in anticipation of what the courts would have done.